Welcome to the first session in our AI maturity series, 6 Pillars for Smarter Business. My name's Lauren Howells and I'm delighted to be your host today. We're just going to give it a couple of minutes so that everyone can join the session, and in the meantime, let me spend a second or two setting the scene. So today's session is brought to you by Sopra Steria Next, the consulting arm of Sopra Steria. Sopra Steria Next works across industries to help organisations navigate complex change, unlock new value and become more resilient and future ready. Whether it's rethinking operations, building responsible AI strategies, or driving digital transformation, we're here to make it happen. As I said, this is the first of a 4-part series of webinars where we'll be exploring what it means to become a truly AI mature organisation. Across these sessions, we'll be diving into our 6-pillar framework, which helps organisations move from experimenting with AI to embedding it in a way that drives real business value. We know that AI isn't just about algorithms and data, it's about leadership, about capability, vision and trust. And that's exactly what we'll be unpacking throughout this series. So today's session is all about laying the foundations and setting the scene for AI maturity. And we're focusing on the first 2 pillars of the framework today, strategy and governance, 2 areas that are absolutely critical if you want your AI initiatives to succeed and to scale in a responsible and sustainable way. So we've got 3 amazing speakers with us today who are really going to bring a range of perspectives and practical insights. We have Gary Craven, who's our head of AI strategy and transformation, Ian Allen, who's our AI consulting manager, and we have Andy Whitehurst, who is Sopra Steria's chief technology officer. So before I hand over to our wonderful speakers, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. So first of all, this is a one-way webinar, so no one can see you or hear you. So feel free to relax, grab a coffee and enjoy the session. If you'd like to ask questions, and we really encourage you to do so, please use Slido. You can submit questions with your name or anonymously throughout the session, and then I'll pop back at the end to put your questions to our speakers. And finally, if you'd like to turn on closed captions, you can find that option in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. So that's everything from me. I'm going to hand over to Gary now.
Thank you, Lauren. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. As Lauren said, I'm Gary Craven. I head AI strategy and transformation for Sopra Steria Next, and I'm thrilled to share with you our insights and approach to how we assess your organization's AI maturity based upon our proven AI maturity assessment framework that my team has passionately been developing and delivering with clients, on how I can help accelerate you from your journey of isolated experiments to enterprise-wide impact. As many of you will know, business and technology leaders are under pressure to scale AI fast, particularly with the emergence of agentic AI and the seismic impact it can have in transforming operations. AI has moved from experimentation to mainstream discussion in every boardroom, from small-scale pilots in marketing or technology. We're now seeing large enterprises embedding AI into their strategic workflows, using it to reimagine how work gets done. These systems are capable of perceiving, reasoning, planning, and taking actions autonomously. They're not just reactive, they're proactive, no longer just tools, but the potential for a digital workforce. But they're not isolated tools, they're embedded in processes, they deliver business value, they're governed, they're connected to data, and importantly, they're built on a foundation of maturity. But here's the challenge, and it's a pattern that we're seeing time and time again across nearly every industry. The technology is outpacing the organization's ability to adopt it. So why is that? Just quickly looking at some of those common challenges and focusing specifically on the pillars that we're going to explore today. Firstly, a lack of a cohesive strategy. Many organizations are running multiple disconnected pilots, often with no central oversight. There's duplication, inconsistency, and a lack of shared learning. I read with interest last week McKinsey's 2025 AI report, and it's some really noteworthy statistics. It showed that only 1% of companies have reached AI maturity, yet 92% plan to invest more. 3 times more employees are using GenAI for a third of their work than leaders imagine, and more than 70% of employees believe that within 2 years, GenAI will change more than of the work. Yet, interestingly, C-suite leaders are nearly 2.5 times more likely to point to employee readiness than their own vision, and that's despite 3 times more employees using GenAI than they actually think. So what does all of this tell us? For an organization's strategy is alignment. Business objectives, so the right decisions on use cases can be prioritized. Alignment on technology blueprints, so the right can be made, and alignment to user needs to accelerate widespread adoption. Another one of the biggest barriers to AI adoption is trust. In the same report, 71% of employees trust their employers to deploy ethically, but without clear governance, AI implementation can raise concerns over data security, privacy. Companies must practices transparency and compliance to avoid reputation and legal risks. This regulatory pressure is rising, especially with things like the EU AI Act. That's why the next step in AI maturity assessment is so important. Before you need to understand where you're starting from, and that's where maturity does come in. It provides a structured view of your strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities for your executive team language for AI capability. As a reminder for those who missed talk a few weeks ago, in our framework, we assess maturity across 6 critical business pillars: strategy, governance, and ethics. Is your architecture interoperable, scalable, secure? And from a data perspective, data high quality, controlled, and accessible. That's the lifeblood of AI after all. From an expertise perspective, do you have the talent, both technically and strategically, to support AI? And when we look at culture, is your organization and your people ready? Is there openness to experimentation, or AI initiatives met with resistance or fear? Against we measure them against our 9 intersecting guiding principles. So this structured approach provides the baseline to ensure that AI solutions are impactful, sustainable, and secure, providing a strong foundation for long-term success. So just to quickly canter through those 9 guiding principles from a value management perspective, every AI initiative should be tied to a measurable outcome, whether that's cost saving, revenue growth, speed of transformation, or service quality. From a risk management perspective, it covers everything from data privacy to algorithmic bias. AI comes with new types of risk. Sustainability, we know AI workloads can be energy intensive. Transparency and trust, AI needs to be explainable. People must understand what AI is doing and why, especially in those highly regulated environments. Innovation experimentation, scalability, are you able to design AI systems that scale not just in logic, but in infrastructure, security, and business continuity? Security and privacy, do you have the right controls in place to protect your sensitive data? AI is using your most valuable information. You have to make sure it does so responsibly. From an employee empowerment perspective, how do you mitigate against the inherent resistance that AI is replacing people? And finally, collaboration and knowledge sharing. Does your organization foster the fertilization required to embrace these new technologies? So I'm going to pass over first to Ian and then to Andy, who'll take an in-depth look at how we evaluate your organization's strategy and governance pillars respectively. Ian, over to you.
Thanks, Gary. So, as mentioned, I'm a consulting manager in the AI practice with over 20 years experience in data insights, technology and market research, and I also play a leading role in shaping our consulting propositions and offerings. As mentioned, we'll now explore what that strategy and vision pillar means and how the intersection of those 9 principles that Gary spoke about manifests itself in the things that we assess and search for. By its nature, these things, these considerations within this strategy pillar of the assessment are holistic and focused on policies and goals and plans within your organization. Strategy is spoken about a great deal, and it's a key area for both the tech industry and government. However, the tech industry's research and studies indicate a great deal of discrepancy in this area. Some reports highlight that although 82% of global organizations have or use AI, only 39% have a comprehensive strategy. Others suggest that 76% of surveyed organizations are considered to be in a leading position when it comes to strategic preparedness for AI. Others still suggest that 80% of AI projects fail, primarily due to a lack of a clear strategy, leading to the organization not being mature enough to adopt the solution. Whether it's glass half full or glass half empty, it doesn't change the fact that there's a very high probability that strategic considerations are a priority for you, whether that's to stay in the leading pack amid fierce competition or to close the gap against other organizations. Although all pillars are created equally, this one is very much foundational in the things it covers. And a positive assessment here will, by default, be a bridge to positive assessments and pave the way to a higher state of readiness in the other pillars. That's because the first principle we'll consider is value management, which is essentially looking at how AI initiatives are designed and managed to deliver maximum value, and especially aligning with organizational goals and delivering those all-important measurable benefits. The first consideration seems simple: AI strategy. Is there one? Is it a good one? What determines good? Well, like many folk, I like to refer to Richard Rumelt's well-known publication, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, in which he states, the kernel of a strategy contains three elements: a diagnosis, a guiding policy, and coherent action. So it is evidence of these elements we'll look for, amongst other indicators of strategic maturity, such as how projects are planned and managed, or the awareness of challenges and bottlenecks to be addressed. The second consideration relating to value management is project prioritization. Unlike our assessment pillars, not all AI projects are created equal. Mature organizations use structured frameworks, like value and complexity matrices, to identify initiatives that deliver measurable value and long-term advantage. This ensures resources are focused where they matter most. Next, we also look at the realization of quantifiable benefits. An important indicator of an organization's maturity and thus ability to successfully adopt AI is that it must not sit in a silo or a lab, but be able to scale in order to deliver benefits that can be quantified and measured through tracked metrics and KPIs. So, does the organization know what those success measures look like? And if so, how are they tracked? The fourth consideration here is the alignment with business goals. This may sound obvious, but is highly dependent on the context of what those goals are. For example, if your organization has a wider business goal to expand into new markets, then it's likely that your AI systems would need to offer multilingual capabilities and adhere to regional laws and compliance requirements. And finally, human-centered research. Ultimately, in one form or another, value in AI is achieved by serving people, whether that be customers, employees, or partners. This means involving them early through interviews, usability testing, and behavioral research. When people trust and understand AI, adoption increases and paves the way for delivering value. So I hope that gives a solid overview of how we assess the principle of value management when it comes to AI maturity. Before I talk to the next principle, just consider this question. Are your organization's strategies, AI or otherwise, defined by that concept of diagnosis, guiding policy, and coherent actions? In other words, do you know what issues or scenarios your strategy is striving to achieve or avoid, and how that translates into actionable plans and activities, and how that can relate to AI? The next principle is that of risk management. In addition to magnifying existing risks, AI introduces new dimensions of risk, such as bias, explainability, or even reputational damage. That's what makes it so essential to have strategic risk governance integrated into your planning, which means we'll be looking at assignment of ownership, defined escalation paths, and AI risk being embedded into your risk registers. And needless to say, this all feeds heavily into the governance pillar, which Andy will soon be talking through. Also, risk management protocols must evolve with the technology, especially with such a fast evolving technology as AI. For example, does your organization currently have controls in place for issues relevant to generative AI, such as content authenticity and protecting or detecting intellectual property? And if an incident or issue were to occur, what does your incident response plan look like? We're no longer talking about cybersecurity in the traditional sense. Now we also need to consider model drift, data poisoning, and unintended consequences, and so we'll be looking at the presence and effectiveness of any detection mechanisms, communication protocols, and recovery procedures. And finally, the consideration of operational resilience. How robust is the system? How well can it absorb, resist, and recover from adverse events? such that it can maintain trust and continuity in the service. Moving on, sustainability is no longer some optional consideration and therefore forms our third pillar in its own right. It begins with a clear communication of a focus on sustainability in your AI goals and vision, which feeds into having an assessment of sustainability risks and benefits. For example, training large AI models consumes energy, but AI can also optimize supply chains and reduce waste and support ESG reporting. So we'll be measuring the presence and effectiveness of tools and processes that impact both sides of the equation. And don't allow your AI strategy to overlook the potential of AI in strategic use cases, such as energy efficiency and waste or water management. These are examples of the things that mature organizations can identify and invest in. Transparency and trust is the basis of our fourth pillar. And again, a founding consideration of our assessment is that such matters are encompassed in the organization's AI goals and vision, and thus clearly communicated. Stakeholders need to understand not just what you're doing, but why and how success will be measured. This all helps build confidence, as does transparent planning. It's not just the aforementioned goals and vision that need to be clearly communicated, but the plans and timelines and organizational roadmap for AI adoption that must also be shared. And finally, having defined key principles isn't just a nice and ethical thing to do, but is instrumental to have such definitions documented, accessible, and embedded in your approach and governance. Things like, what does fairness mean in your organization's industry or context? How is accountability ensured? Or what's the redress procedure if something goes wrong? Innovation and experimentation is the theme of our next principle. Whilst there are some notable exceptions, such as microwave ovens and post-it notes, innovation generally doesn't happen by accident. It happens by design. And so setting strategic themes that align with your enterprise goals without specifying the solution and therefore providing room to innovate is a key measure of organizational AI maturity. Then we also consider the organization's ability to identify and prioritize enablers, such as funding, technology, and skills, and having the resources to conduct pilots, hackathons, and run cross-functional teams. The sixth principle, scalability, naturally has a little more to think about because it's a key objective of any organization seeking to adopt and leverage AI. The technical aspect of this is simple. Scalable growth can be achieved in the simplest sense by ensuring that your AI systems and platforms can grow. More data, more users, and more complexity, and that this involves appropriately flexible and adaptable designs. In order to know when systems need to grow, having an agile enterprise strategy allows iterative processes and the ability to pivot and react based on feedback and changing requirements. What would that feedback loop look like in your organization? Does it exist for non-AI resources? And if so, can it be applied to AI systems? In order to manage projects or opportunities of varying size and scope, a strong AI portfolio and management thereof will facilitate short-term quick wins to gain momentum, scaling up into medium and long-term initiatives to leverage the measured benefits. Think of it as your AI investment strategy, in which you diversify and place your chips in accordance with your organization's risk appetite. And your operating model is key to enabling scaled solutions, with clearly defined roles, responsibilities, and processes to facilitate the right decisions that lead to scaling the right solution at the right time. And finally, don't forget about an exit strategy, whether that be exiting from current legacy systems into an AI tool, or in the future exiting that AI tool itself. It's all about ensuring a seamless transition from one technology or solution to the next. To address this consideration, you need to be thinking about data portability, interoperability, and contract flexibility. Avoid lock-ins and general disruption that prevents a graceful transition. Now, the principle of security and privacy has relatively straightforward considerations from a strategic perspective. Naturally, some of our other pillars have much more to consider in relation to this, but quite simply, this has to be embedded as a principle from day one and baked into every stage of deciding, designing, developing, and deploying an AI system. Consideration being given to encryption, access and identity management, regulatory compliance, emerging threats, and much more are all requisite parts of a strong approach to security and privacy. The penultimate set of considerations is rooted in bringing this all round to what was mentioned earlier. AI's value is realised by serving people, and it's people, not AI, who are responsible for skillfully adopting and embracing AI to achieve that value. And employee empowerment is key to achieving this. Encouraging ownership means not burdening employees with risk and governance, but giving them the autonomy to explore, experiment, and integrate their ideas into their workflows. Perhaps applicable to more than AI maturity, but defining smart objectives on a personal level that align with the wider strategic goals will help create alignment and accountability. And finally, of course, as we all should do anyway, it's vital to recognise the value and impact of great work through the establishment or tailoring of recognition programmes to reward notable contributions. It's worth asking yourself, does my organisation already do this? And many do. But if so, how would it need to change or evolve to reflect the developing of AI maturity and the adoption of AI solutions? The final principle is collaboration and knowledge sharing. Achieving a higher level of AI maturity isn't a solo endeavour. It's achieved by cross-functional teams over a period of time, and thus requires knowledge to be shared and treated as a strategic asset. We'll look to see how much it features within the organisational strategy, and thus what platforms, processes and cultures exist that make it easy to capture, codify and reuse insights and gained expertise. To support this, good organisational design can play a role, encouraging knowledge sharing and collaboration through AI centres of excellence, cross-functional teams and communities of practice. So I hope that's given you some valuable insight into what we look for, and most importantly why, in the strategy pillar of our AI maturity assessment. And hopefully it's also provided some food for thought and some ideas of where your organisation is maybe already really strong, or where other areas where some further work can be identified. As mentioned, some of those considerations do tie into the next pillar, for which I'll hand over to Andy Whitehurst, Sopra Steria UK's Chief Technology Officer, to talk to us about the governance and ethics elements of our assessment. Over to you, Andy.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Ian, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks again for joining us. As introduced, I'm the UK CTO, but I'm also the co-chair of our internal AI governance board, which I'll talk to you about in a few minutes' time. So, similarly, in a moment, I'll step through the key kind of principles and the intersections with the pillars. But I just wanted to kick off with a bit of a definition in terms of our view of the challenge and of the solution, and our view of what governance means and what ethics actually means, and its role within the whole overall governance. Sorry, if you can just go back. I haven't quite got that far yet. Thanks, Gary. Brilliant. So yeah, in terms of the challenge, for me, this is about making governance a priority in terms of what you're doing with AI. It needs to be part of the DNA of your organization, and it's really easy with all of the excitement and the kind of opportunity around AI for it to really quickly become the Wild West, and that's something that we really don't want to happen. So making governance just part of your culture, part of your DNA, part of the way that you think about adopting AI is for us the kind of challenge. How do we help you do that? Well, our solution is following through those 9 key principles, but it is also grounded. Yeah, so I am the co-chair of the AI Governance Board. I did help to create that board about 10 months ago. Off the back of the hype wave, if you like, of generative AI, we recognised in our own business that there's an enormous amount of opportunity to use AI, and everybody was really excited about it, but we just couldn't let that disappear off in an uncontrolled explosion. Yeah, so we created that governance board. I brought together procurement, legal, our compliance teams around data protection, myself from a technology viewpoint, but also, very importantly for today, making sure that we had ethics stakeholders and ethics experts around the table to make sure that we were constantly doing the right and the transparent thing. So I'll talk a little more about that later, but hopefully we can talk about how we talk the talk, but also walk the walk. Thanks, Gary. So AI governance. For me, this is about overseeing the execution of your strategy. It's keeping your organization honest. It's holding each other to account. And that's with a view to making sure that we genuinely explore and get the benefits of AI. And it's making sure that we recognise upfront the potential risks of introducing AI into our business processes, into our businesses, our organisations. And it's making sure wherever possible, we're proactively mitigating those risks. So that's the governance piece. Now, the ethics bit for me is the easiest bit to overlook. It's a massive part of the governance process, and it's a really crucial lens in terms of looking at the risks and the benefits of adoption of the adoption of AI. But it's really easy to overlook it. It's really easy to put it into the too hard box, and that's something we really want to help you not have to do. It's easy to overlook because it's very subjective as well. It can vary from business to business exactly where you position yourselves in terms of something being ethical or not ethical. It can vary from person to person. So it's really, really important that we think about that up front and we think strategically about ethics. Just some examples here, of kind of the areas that we have to think about. There's a few that are risks and one that's probably much more of a benefit. But you've got to think. You mentioned it earlier in the call. You've got to think about that safety and compliance aspect. Who's now going to get access to this data? Who's going to get access from the learning from my large language model? Is it right? Is that kind of knock-on byproduct worth it? You've got to have a look at that and make sure you're making a balanced decision. Transparency. So depending on how great your training data is, you may or may not be building in biases and unfairness. But, is the tolerance acceptable? Is it acceptable that there may be some bias, there may be some unfairness? Your business, your organization needs to make a call, because perfection can genuinely be the enemy of good. But you do need to make a conscious decision about whether it's right for you and right for your business. And the morality point for me, and I'll give a real example here. I was in a client conversation about 2 months ago now, and we were demonstrating the potential of voice-based AI automation as part of a call center, as part of a contact center. And we built some fantastic concepts and we were demoing them in the room. And then we started talking about use cases. And one of the use cases that came up was in relation to death in service. And we all sat around the table, and whilst we could all see the potential opportunity of digital deflection, we absolutely categorically, from a moral perspective, said no. That's not a use case we would ever consider for that particular scenario. Yeah, we want the empathy. No matter how empathetic you can make an AI solution, we want the empathy of a human in such a tragic situation and such a difficult situation for the end customer, citizen, or employee. So there's a real moral kind of guide that we need to have here as well. Now, on a more positive front, the whole ability to create equity, creating a level playing field and an equitable outcome. And I'll give you an example from our own organisation here in terms of our adoption of Copilot. If you provide Copilot to employees who require the use of assistive software, for example, a screen reader, you've suddenly moved from a situation where their screen reader needs to go through an 85-page pensions T's and C's document to a screen reader going through a half-page summary that was generated by Copilot. And for me, forget the process efficiencies there, just the ethical aspect of creating that equitable playing field and allowing all of our workforce to be productive, to have a fruitful role, to have a clear career ahead of them is worth a lot more than perhaps the business case would suggest. Next slide, please, Gary. So I've got a couple of stats that I wanted to share. If you take one thing away from this WebEx, please take the title of this slide, because I think this is very powerful. So governance removes rather than creates barriers within your organization. I know a lot of people see governance and think bureaucracy and think wasted time and think slowing down the pace, stopping innovation, According to a really recent report earlier this year, I think it was February time, that Microsoft commissioned with IDC, 31% of the respondents said that the lack of governance and risk management was the top barrier to them adopting and scaling AI. that was the number one reason. It was ahead of capability, which was 30%, I think, from memory. So the number one reason was not having the governance and risk management in place in order to exploit and adopt AI. So for me, that's a really powerful statistic. But you've got to think about the ethical piece as well. Again, it's a slightly older stat, but Institute of Directors Ireland had this great piece of research they did. 58% of company directors recognizing that there's an ethical risk of AI, but just not having an appropriate strategy to back it up, to create the guide rails and so on. So again, a couple of interesting stats there, hopefully for you to take away. Let's go. So if we start to look at the dissection and the intersections of these principles, the 9 principles against the 6 pillars that were talked about earlier, I'll just dive into the detail on a couple of these. Similarly to Ian, on the left-hand side, I've got sort of the sub-principles, if you like, that we tend to look at as part of the maturity review. So I'll deep dive on the value for all. Value is far too often, in our opinion, looked at purely in financial terms. Very important to think about the broader stakeholders. My example around our colleagues with screen readers is a great example, but also to consider the environment that colleagues have touched on it a couple of times. Clearly, there's a hell of a lot of compute required to do some of this AI automation. Is it worth it? Is it the right thing to do? And if it is the right thing to do, are we measuring it? And we're measuring it appropriately. So making sure we've got the right stakeholders to build up that value case is absolutely crucial, and making sure that we work towards equitable outcomes for all, and we don't overlook some of the outcomes that might not be absolutely obvious on the face of things. It's about lived experience, making sure we're including the people who are going to benefit. It's about, as I've said, the net value. The healthy skepticism one's brilliant. I'm a real fan of this. It's about making sure, and this is back to the whole kind of wave of hype and enthusiasm around AI. Take a couple of skeptics on the journey with you. Take a couple of people who are going to sort of scratch their chin and go, no, I don't like that. I don't think that's right. It's really important to make sure you do take everybody on a journey, not just the converts, because they'll ask some really interesting questions that it's better to ask up front. Thanks, Gary. So the second principle, again, following the same model, is risk management. I think the most important one here for me is this first one, the normative principles. My strong belief is, and this is kind of to the the Institute of Directors, the IOD point, you need a set of principles, a set of ethical principles that guide your actions around AI. We need to make sure that we really understand what matters for your business. Everybody's in a different position on that scale of what's ethical and what isn't ethical, but make sure that you reflect on that. Think about the values that your organization holds. Obviously try wherever possible to be as ethical as possible, but there is always a bit of a balance, and it's about getting that balance right. You might want to start looking at things like the HLEG, the High Level Expert Group principles. They were the foundation, really, of the EU AI Act. You might also want to take a look at the UK government's 10 principles for the use of AI, and we've used those foundations quite heavily in the way that we've shaped our own AI governance board. They're the kind of questions that I think it's really sensible to start asking. There are other aspects we look at, picking out things like compliance, looking at ISO standards, looking at the NIST risk framework, looking at the EU AI Act, because it's extraterritorial, so we do often have to take it into account. But there's several others that we look at there. If we move on to the next one, sustainability. The key one I'm pulling out here in terms of a sub-principle is the supply chain one. So, and this is where it's very opaque. And this is where we need to lean on our technology providers. We need to lean on our system integrators. We need to lean on our trusted partners to better understand the impact of our upstream and downstream supply chains and processes. So really crucial here to make sure that you understand that map. You understand what your supplier landscape looks like. You perhaps even start influencing some of your procurement principles. You perhaps start looking at how you onboard new suppliers and the questions that you ask of them, because it's probably better to ask up front rather than complain at the end when you find out your supply chain just doesn't take ESG anywhere near as seriously as perhaps your business does. So there's some great opportunities here to just lift the maturity of that procurement and onboarding side of your business. There's many others as well around the roles, responsibilities, making sure you engage in the right stakeholders and so on. Next, Gary. So transparency and trust. I'll skip through this relatively quickly because I've already talked about our governance framework. But for me, any purchase, use of AI should be accompanied by that robust governance framework. Make sure we've got the right people around that table as well, and make sure you've got some cynical people around that table, to my earlier point. Yeah, but make sure you're looking through every appropriate lens in terms of your use of AI, including things like your brand. Do you want to be associated with the use of AI for that particular use case? It might be the most fantastic productivity saving idea you've ever come up with, but you might just want to walk away from it because it might not be the most appropriate use. The other one I'll pull out here is the demographic expectations sub principle, because I think this is really important. And this is about whenever you come up with an idea, a concept, something in that kind of pilot proof of concept phase around the use of AI, make sure you've got the right people involved in that process. Not just the technologists that get really excited about stuff. Make sure that you've got the people who are going to benefit or not benefit from the actual outcome that you're looking to produce. Take them on that journey. Some of this as well is about making sure, if employees are going to have, you touched on it earlier, Ian, if employees are going to have some work taken away from them, let's take them on the journey. Let's help them understand and embrace AI so that they're looking at how they can leverage AI, what new opportunities and new doors open up for them. We've got to look at all the demographic expectations, not just the most obvious ones. The other quick one I'll touch on here is representative and data representation and representative data. Absolutely crucial. Make sure you've got representative people. Make sure you've got representative data. That's going to really lead to much more successful AI implementations. Next, please, Gary. Innovation, customer centricity, led by the needs of the customers, citizens, and employees. Don't go and look for problems with AI. Let problems look for AI. Do it that way round. The answer is AI. What is the question? Is not the right starting point. Turn it on its head. Look for the business problems you've been previously unable to resolve and think about how AI can resolve those, and think about the needs and expectations of those end users. The funding piece as well, really important. Phase that. Think about how you phase that. That culture's innovation. If you need all the answers up front, you don't often have all the answers on an AI program, an AI project. Allow things to gain momentum and then keep going back and checking the progress. Thanks, Gary. The next one for me, this is really crucial, and I'll call out the scope creep and the function creep one. And this is a kind of amplified risk for me in terms of AI. AI is it's created and generated so much excitement. And when you first get to grips with AI and you start throwing challenges at it, the really good thing about it is that it's already extraordinarily capable. It's an extraordinarily capable piece of technology, but that's also a weakness in terms of maintaining the scope and the function creep, because it will just grow and grow and go, oh, could it do this? Can it do that? Maybe it could do this. You'll end up delivering nothing, because you'll just keep throwing bits of functionality to it, and you'll keep chasing your tail, and you'll keep adding complexity, and you'll keep adding time, and you'll keep adding people, and it will grow and grow and grow. Think about how you break that down and deliver small but very meaningful outcomes, and then move to the next. So, create that backlog. Don't allow your first project, your first few programs to grow and grow and grow and try and fix the world. It's not going to happen. You won't achieve anything. So scope creep for me is quite a key piece. The operating model as well, you centralize, is it hub and spoke? Again, something we'd look at in detail as part of the maturity review. Gary? We've already touched on security and privacy. It's a massive consideration from a governance and an ethics perspective. The one I'll touch on here most and deep dive on is the audits. Don't forget to keep dropping in expectedly or unexpectedly and conducting those evaluations to assess how are we applying. Are we walking the walk in terms of what we said we would do in terms of governance and ethics in our use of AI? Keep reminding people, keep educating people as new tools and technologies come out. Look at your principles. Do they need to evolve? Look at your infosec policy. Does it need to evolve? Keep looking at the industry standards. Look at what the UK government are saying good looks like. Feed all of this into what you should be doing as an organisation, and just keep yourself honest on that journey. Gary? So, whistleblowing I've chosen here around employee empowerment, and it kind of links to the previous one around security and privacy and looking at audits. Create an opportunity for your employees, for your colleagues, to wave the white flag. Create something where they can, in a safe environment, anonymously, confidentially, can blow the whistle and say, I'm not happy with that particular use of AI. I don't think that's been through the right testing. I don't think that's an appropriate use case. I think we're using technology that doesn't, align with our fundamentals, values as a business. All those things create an area. There's a lot of noise, confusion, activity. It's really easy to get taken along with it. Create an opportunity for people to just hold you to account. And with the displacement plans as well, I've talked about it, but do be proactive in the way that you think about, look, AI in some circumstances may well replace roles, but let's think about how it increases capacity rather than replacing roles. Let's think about how we take our employees on that journey so that they can benefit from it in the longer term. That's Gary. And then the final one around collaboration and knowledge sharing. So the one I've chosen here is compliance, to sort of deeper dive into clear principles to in terms of appropriate use, accessibility, legal considerations, risk, responsibility. Think about data protection. Think about doing impact assessments around data protection. Think about your GDPR responsibilities, EU AI Act, where that does apply extraterritorially. Make sure you've got all of those ducks in a row in order to make sure that we're as squeaky clean as we possibly can be in our use of AI. And the final one on there is lessons learned. It's a learning curve for all of us. We have learnings out of the way that we initially formed our AI governance board that we've implemented and continuously improved over the last 10 or so months. Create an environment for that, create a capturing mechanism for that, and learn quickly from those mistakes. Gary, that's me. I think it's back over to you.
Thank you, Andy, and thanks, Ian. Thanks for those insights. Some of the key takeaways for me are, from a strategy perspective, the technology is there, but the scale is about understanding that value early. Start with the business problem, not the technology. Encourage pilots, create safe spaces to test ideas. As Andy said, don't wait for perfection. Aim for progress with clear guardrails. And think about designing AI solutions that scale across use cases and business units, trying to avoid custom-built one-offs that can't be reused. And from a governance perspective, it's about responsible AI by design, embedded into every decision. Andy made the point, it's not a blocker, it's an enabler of safe scale. Think about responsible AI from the start. And remember, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So assess your starting point using an AI maturity assessment at the first area, next 6 pillars, 9 principles framework. And just to give you a sense of our approach, it's an AI-powered consultation using in-house developed Gen AI tooling, which means we spend more time getting to know your teams and your business, which means richer insights and better business value delivered. We adopt a 6-step approach. First step is to understand your organization's short and long-term goals, your current challenges, expectations regarding AI adoption. This allows us to tailor the assessment to your specific needs and priorities. The next thing we'll do is engage different levels and departments within your organization. We'll try and generate AI use cases to prioritize and take forward. These interviews really help us to gain insights into the various perspectives within your company on AI adoption. We'll identify any existing barriers and understand the level of support and commitment towards any initiatives required. Then we'll start to synthesize your data. We'll understand your strategy, your compliance, governance, ethics, evaluate existing technology and infrastructure compatibility and scalability, assess your data for quality, completeness, reliability, evaluate your skills, your expertise relevant to AI, and examine those attitudes towards innovation and readiness for change. Then we'll compare your organization's maturity against industry benchmarks. What are the best practices out there in terms of AI adoption? This will help contextualize our assessment findings, identifying areas where you can improve, which can ultimately lead to some competitive advantages. And then using the analysis and the benchmarking, we'll assess your organization's 6 pillars and 9 principles using an AI maturity rating for each, using industry standard CCMI maturity assessment, 5 being optimized, 1 being initial. We'll give you a collaborative view of our rating for each pillar. And finally, we'll create a tailored roadmap for your organization's specific vision and objectives. It'll outline a phased approach, actionable steps, timelines, responsibilities, the key results that you want to measure in order to track progress, and include recommendations for addressing identified weaknesses, leveraging the strengths to maximize the impact of AI adoption, including use case prioritization. At the end of the process, you'll have a clear alignment between your AI and organizational strategies and values. This will be supported by a vision your organization can rally behind. You'll have a personalized, prioritized, defined route to leveraging AI technologies that will maximize business value in an ethical, sustainable, and compliant way, addressing real gaps and accelerators. And you'll ultimately be able to make better decisions regarding AI investments and initiatives. You'll have a clear understanding of where you are, what's working, and what needs to evolve. So to wrap up, AI is here. Agentic AI is the next leap, but you can't scale what you can't measure. And don't think of AI maturity as a linear path, but it's about continuous improvement. In fact, to get you started, we've developed a light version of the tool that's been launched on our website this week, and I believe Lauren is going to share with this audience a direct link to the assessment, so you'll be able to click on it and get your own bespoke report, which looks a little something like this. And please do tune in for the next series in our webinars, where our experts will do a deep dive into technology, data, culture, and expertise pillars. So please do sign up today. Back to you, Lauren, for any questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Andy, Gary, and Ian. That was a really insightful session. Just to confirm that, yes, I have put a link to the AI maturity assessment in Slido on the right-hand side of your screen, and I'll also email it over to all of you once the session is over. So we've had some really good questions so far. Thank you to everybody who submitted already. Just a quick reminder that if there is something you'd still like to ask, it's not too late. You can pop your question in the Slido on the right-hand side of your screen. So let's dive into a few of the questions. So the first one, and the one that's been upvoted the most, is: there feels like there's so much to do. How do I prioritize where I start?
I'll maybe take a swig at that one first, and Andy, Ian, please feel free to jump in. So for me, it's about building confidence with your ex-com and your board to unlock future investment, because ultimately this is going to be a long-term transformation we'll be undertaking. So start small, look for those quick wins. Where have you got low complexity in terms of your business processes, but high compatibility in terms of integration into your existing estate, because you want to be going into that testing phase with the mindset that you are going to scale, and focus on those use cases that will deliver high business value impact and a rapid return. So you're getting results and you're able to feed back to your board early about the successes that you're getting. Andy, Ian, I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, the only thing might be a bit obvious and maybe a stuck record here, but the thing I'd throw into that is making sure that you've got clarity around how you're going to govern AI. You know, let's reflect on that 31%. You know, that was the highest rated barrier and challenge. So think about how you're going to remove that, because I think when you do go to your board and you do talk about that adoption journey, they're going to have the same concerns. So anything you can show that mitigates it and controls it and oversees it, I think would be really useful.
Yeah, and from my perspective, I think it also ties in very much with really trying to identify those early use cases. It ties in with both what Gary and Andy have said, but once you've got an idea of what the problem is that you're trying to solve, that then kind of like shapes the findings and what you choose to prioritize off the back of any maturity assessments that you haven't done.
Thank you. So we had a question from Chris. What do you mean by ethics experts?
You want me to take that one initially? So, and it's a really good question, Chris, because it's probably an assumption on our part that everyone's got ethics experts in their business, and they probably haven't. So we have, over the last 4, 5, 6 years, we've sort of increasingly placed more and more importance on ethics and the ethics of what we're doing. So we've actually recruited individuals from academia who are ethics experts and who in many cases have taught in the sphere and discipline of ethics. So we do have within our organisation proper subject matter experts around ethics, what is ethical, the ethical use of IT. Clearly that's now exploded into the ethical use of AI. But yeah, probably shouldn't have assumed that everybody's got one, but please feel free to tap into ours. Obviously, small sales pitch there, but yeah, it's a good question, Chris. Thanks for raising it.
Fab. And I think staying with you, Andy, actually, what are the main lessons that we've had from running an internal AI governance board?
Yeah, no, that's another great question. So look, we set it up 10 months ago now, and that governance board is designed to assess every internal and external, so everything we do for clients, internal and external, planned use of AI before we go production with it. Yeah, so lessons learnt, volume. That sort of volume of demand for the AI governance board, it's really easy to underestimate that. We're pretty busy, and we're kind of doing it extracurricularly. So we've already got our day jobs, and on top of that, we said, yeah, we'd absolutely want to govern the use of AI in our business. So just don't underestimate the amount of effort required. Again, depends size and scale of your business and sort of how far down that AI journey you are, but it can quickly be quite a significant task. The second point sort of relates to one of the points I made earlier, actually, is just about positioning governance as an enabler, not a barrier. When I first dreamt up the idea that we needed an AI governance board, you could just hear the intake of breath in the room. It was like, not more governance, more red tape. But again, got to take people on that journey. And it's why I love that quote so much about it's just the number one barrier. It's not having one is the barrier. Having one is the enabler. And just take people on that journey nice and early on. My final point, Lauren, is, AI in the shadows. There is so much use of AI. It's really difficult to make sure that you are on top of every single use case going on in your business. And that's a continual wave of education and enlightenment, and making sure people understand why we're doing this and the risks of not putting things through the board.
Fantastic, thank you. And we've got another question here in the same sort of sphere, let's say. What do you mean by governance and risk management? Surely this is embedded in all organizations. Is that what we see or not the case?
Shall I take that again? But then obviously if you want to add anything, Gary or Ian, please do. Yeah, governance and risk is absolutely embedded in all organizations. The thing for me with AI is it amplifies a lot of existing risks that you are looking at. You may suddenly need a new set of stakeholders and individuals around the table in order to truly assess the risks and the governance requirements of AI. And actually, it does create some new risks for me. So certainly 5 years ago, sitting on an IT governance board, I wasn't worried about where my large language model was hosted and whether it backed off to an open AI solution that was in China. That wasn't a consideration. Today, it's a massive consideration. So So yeah, absolutely. It's always existed, and so it should have done. This is about really putting that governance and risk lens very accurately onto the use of AI within your organisation.
Yeah, I'd agree, Andy, and it amplifies them. But the new standards that companies need to be aware of as well, and introduce them into their risk frameworks, things like the algorithmic transparency registers, something that governments are looking more and more for. So it's important that organisations are keeping in step with those emerging regulations.
It's a good point, potentially ISO 42001 as well. So yeah, it's a really good point, Gary.
Great. I've got another question here from Amika. So, like humans, AI systems absorb biases from their training data. How does Soprasteria address such ethical challenges and ensure AI transparency? Oh, who's going to take
that one, Andy?
Do you want me to go? I was only not answering because I felt like I was answering too many of the questions.
They're all governance and ethics.
think-
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think I'd already mentioned it briefly in one of the slides, actually. So I think the first thing for me is to make sure that your training data is as representative as it possibly can be. And again, but there is always a perfection versus good or good enough. So clearly, you're going to implement bias into that AI if your training data doesn't represent reality, real life. Your full cross section of customers or employees or citizens or whatever it might be. Then you're not going to get an unbiased outcome. You will probably never. Well, it's really difficult to say that, to get to a position where there's zero bias built into something. There's probably a requirement to have a degree of tolerance, an acceptable amount of tolerance. But it's a great question. And that's, for me, when I was talking about this kind of where you are on the ethical scale, I'd like everybody to be as ethical as possible, don't get me wrong. But, perfection is going to be extraordinarily difficult. You may not have thought it's really difficult to think of every single eventuality, every use case, every scenario, and make sure that your data is fully representative to support that, because of the pace of change, of adoption, of technology evolution. It's really tough, but we have to aspire to be, for me, as ethical as we possibly can afford to be. Make sense?
Super. Thank you. So I'm going to finish with this last question, but if we didn't get to yours, I apologize, and please email it across to us and we'd be happy to get into a conversation over email about it. So I'm going to finish with this question. I've seen a few maturity models in the market. What makes yours different?
I'll give that one a go. Nice challenging question to finish on. Thank you, Lauren. So the first point I would make is fundamentally it's not. We've intentionally made every effort to design and align it to industry best practice, using analyst insights from Gartner and PAC, using watermarks in the industry around CCMI, even align it to the Gov AI book principles. The AI market's confusing enough without companies and government departments being told 101 different ways of how they should approach and assess their maturity. So we want to make sure we're taking a consistent approach. But what I think sets us apart is we try and live and breathe what we're preaching. We use AI to accelerate the analysis process, and this allows us to build rich relationships with our clients. And secondly, it's that relationship aspect that's the key. We want to be collaborative and make sure the decision makers that we're working with have the confidence to sell their strategy to the board. And we want to be that long-term partner to transform. We don't want to land there, give a report, disappear after 4 weeks. We want to help them right along their journey to AI transformation.
Fab. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to all three of you. That was a really, really great way to kick off this series, and you've given us loads to think about in terms of how to really lay the groundwork for AI maturity. So if you're signed up for this session, do not fret. You are automatically signed up for the rest of the series, and we look forward to seeing you the same time next week for the next session. Goodbye for now.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
all.